Nobody tells you this, but some towns in America didn't move on. They just paused. Like the universe hit save game sometime around 1977, went out for cigarettes, and never came back. We're talking towns where the diners still smell like burnt coffee and regret. The signage is aggressively brown, and everyone looks like they're either your uncle or someone who definitely knows your uncle. Places where bell-bottoms technically never died, they just evolved into sweatpants. This list exists because every top cities to move to in 2025 video lied to you. They show rooftop pools, kombucha on tap, and people who say things like community-driven living. What they don't show you is the towns that said, yeah, no, we're good. Towns that never got the memo about open-concept kitchens or gluten. These places are cheap, weirdly charming, slightly haunted, and emotionally stuck in a disco loop. Some are adorable, some are concerning. All of them feel like time travel without the courtesy of a warning sign. We're counting down 10 American towns that haven't changed since the 1970s. Expect rotary phones, wood paneling, and at least one guy named Gary who's been sitting at the same bar stool since Nixon resigned. Like the video if you enjoy cultural whiplash. Subscribe if you like affordable housing with a side of mild existential dread. And let's start with a town that looks like the 70s, filed for squatters' rights and won. Town number 1, Bisbee, Arizona. Here's your one-liner. Bisbee feels like the 70s, but the weird part of the 70s. Not the disco part. The everyone smells like patchouli and unresolved feelings part. First, the price shock. You can still find a house here for less than what some people pay annually to emotionally support their car. Not Instagram cheap, actual eyebrow raising. Is this allowed? Cheap. Bisbee sits in southeastern Arizona, tucked into the Mule Mountains like it's hiding from modern society. Population is roughly 5,000, and that includes artists, retirees, and at least 3 people who may or may not be ghosts. It used to be a booming copper mining town. When the mines shut down, Bisbee didn't reinvent itself, it just leaned into the vibes. Why is it cheap? Jobs are scarce, infrastructure is questionable, and the town decided stairs were a personality trait. Seriously, there are staircases everywhere. Streets that turn into staircases. Staircases that turn into philosophical questions. Sidewalks that say, figure it out. Local quote energy is very Reddit core. Moved here in '89. Thought I'd leave in a year. Still here. Send help or don't. The town is artsy in a way that feels aggressively sincere. Like someone will invite you to a poetry reading in their living room and mean it. Stores close when they feel like it. Drivers move at the speed of reflection. And everyone dresses like it's either a thrift store photo shoot or laundry day after a mild breakdown. Town number 2, Eureka Springs, Arkansas. One-liner up top. Eureka Springs feels like the 70s dressed up as a Victorian town and never broke character. It's like if bell-bottoms discovered crystals and decided to run a municipality. Let's talk price shock first because that's how they get you. You can still buy a house here for less than what people in major cities spend annually on wellness. Not luxury wellness. The kind that's just a candle and a personality shift. Housing is suspiciously affordable, and that's your first clue that something spiritually unusual is happening. Eureka Springs is tucked into the Ozark Mountains of northwest Arkansas. Population hovering around 2,100 people, which means everyone knows everyone. And if they don't know you yet, they absolutely will by Thursday. Historically, this place boomed as a spa and healing town. People came here in the late 1800s to take the waters. By the 1970s, it had fully transitioned into a counterculture sanctuary and then just stayed there permanently. Why is it cheap? Limited jobs, limited expansion, strict historic preservation rules, and terrain that looks at modern infrastructure and says, no. Roads curve like they were designed by someone avoiding responsibility. Parking is more of a suggestion, and new development is treated like an intrusive thought the town collectively refuses to entertain. Local quote vibe is immaculate. It's magical here, but you have to be okay with nothing making sense. That's not a warning, that's a mission statement. This town is aggressively quirky. Shops sell crystals, handmade soap, incense, and at least one object you cannot explain to your parents. Everyone believes in something: energy, vibes, astrology, or at minimum, the healing power of soup. Drivers go slow, not because of traffic, but because they're thinking about life. Or goats, hard to say. The weather is moody. Mist rolls in like it's being paid. Summers are humid enough to make your soul sweat. Winters are gray, damp, and oddly poetic. The town creaks when it rains, literally. Buildings settle, floors complain. You will hear noises and decide not to ask questions. Eureka Springs is charming, unsettling, deeply sincere, and locked in a perpetual 70s mindset where capitalism is tolerated but not trusted. It's beautiful in a way that feels handmade, and concerning in a way that feels intentional. Town number 3, Marfa, Texas. One-liner, no warm-up. Marfa feels like the 1970s went to art school, dropped out, and somehow got famous anyway. Let's start with the price shock, because Marfa is confusing on purpose. You can either find a house that costs less than a year of private therapy, or a shack priced like it was personally blessed by an art critic in New York. There is no middle. Marfa's housing market is a personality test you didn't consent to. Marfa sits way out in West Texas, population just under 2,000 people, surrounded by so much nothing that your phone loses signal and your thoughts get louder. Historically, it was a railroad water stop, then a ranching town. Then in the 1970s, it got adopted by minimalist artists who looked at the desert and said, yes, this is where we confront ourselves. Donald Judd arrived, art followed, and the town basically froze in a permanent analog creative era. Why is it cheap? Distance. Isolation. Jobs that mostly involve hospitality, art institutions, or knowing someone. The nearest big city is hours away, and the desert does not care about your LinkedIn. Infrastructure exists, but it's sparse. Wi-Fi is optional. Silence is mandatory. Local quote energy feels painfully accurate. You don't come to Marfa to do things. You come here to think about why you thought you needed to. That person definitely owns linen pants. The town is artsy in a deeply unserious way. Someone will explain an installation to you that is literally a box in the sand and say, it challenges capitalism. Stores close early because sunsets are a priority. Drivers wave because there are only 12 of them. And everyone dresses like they're either attending an art opening or hiding from one. Then there are the Marfa lights, mysterious glowing orbs that appear in the desert. Scientists say atmospheric reflections. Locals say, yeah, we've seen them. Nobody seems concerned. That should concern you. Marfa hasn't changed because it doesn't want to. It resists modern life with the confidence of someone who owns land and opinions. It's beautiful, pretentious, peaceful, and deeply stuck in a 1970s creative standoff with the world. Town number 4, Galena, Illinois. One-liner up front. Galena feels like the 1970s got stuck inside a history museum and everyone just agreed not to touch anything. Price shock first because Midwest math is undefeated. You can still buy a house here for less than what people in coastal cities pay annually for parking and emotional damage. Not new build cheap. Carpet that's seen Nixon, cheap. And somehow, it works. Galena sits in the far northwest corner of Illinois, population just over 3,000, surrounded by rolling hills that look nothing like the rest of the state. It used to be a booming mining town in the 1800s, then tourism stepped in around the 1970s and said, let's freeze this exactly here. And they meant it. The downtown looks like a period drama set where everyone shops for antiques and fudge with intense commitment. Why is it cheap? Limited industry, strict preservation rules, and a tourism economy that peaks hard and then immediately vanishes. Jobs exist, but they're seasonal, service-based, and require a high tolerance for matching aprons. Expansion is frowned upon. Modernization is treated like a personal insult. Local quote vibe. It's beautiful, but winter will humble you. That's not a warning, that's a threat. The pace is slow even by Midwest standards. Stores close early. Everyone drives like they're on a scenic tour of their own life. The fashion is aggressively practical, and there is a suspicious amount of Civil War trivia energy in the air at all times. Galena didn't change because it didn't need to. It found a lane in the 70s and stayed there politely. It's charming, affordable, and quietly stuck in time. Town number 5, Trinidad, Colorado. One-liner first, Trinidad feels like the 1970s stopped by for a smoke break and never came back inside. Let's hit the price shock. You can still buy a full house here for less than what people in Denver pay to breathe near the mountains. We're talking real, grounded, why is this still legal? Affordability. The kind of prices that make you suspicious, then curious, then mildly hopeful. Trinidad sits in southern Colorado, right near the New Mexico border, with a population of about 8,000. It used to be a coal mining powerhouse, then a railroad hub, then a town that watched opportunity leave slowly and decided not to chase it. By the 1970s, things plateaued, and Trinidad just stayed exactly there, emotionally and architecturally. Why is it cheap? Jobs are limited, winters are real, and the town has a reputation it never fully shook. For years it was known as the sex change capital of the world because of a pioneering surgeon. That brought attention, then confusion, then a quiet shrug. Industry never fully replaced mining. Growth remains cautious. Ambition exists, but it's polite. Local quote energy feels brutally honest. It's a good place to live as long as you don't expect much. Which is both comforting and devastating. The downtown is charming in a slightly dusty way. Neon signs flicker like they're tired. Stores close early because there's no one to impress. Drivers are calm, possibly because there's nowhere urgent to be. The weather swings wildly. The wind shows up uninvited and overstays. Trinidad hasn't changed because it learned to live with itself. It's affordable, scenic, and emotionally frozen in a very specific decade where expectations were lower and life was simpler. Town number 6, Wallace, Idaho. One-liner, no mercy. Wallace feels like the 1970s clocked in, punched the time card, and never clocked out. Let's start with the price shock, because this is where Idaho quietly flexes. You can still buy a house here for less than what people in Seattle spend annually on parking tickets and passive-aggressive notes from neighbors. Not fancy, not renovated. Just solid, wood-paneled, emotionally intact housing. Wallace sits in northern Idaho, population just under 800 people, which means this is less a town and more a shared understanding. It was a booming silver mining town back in the day, and when the mining slowed, Wallace didn't pivot. It preserved itself, literally. In the 1970s, the entire downtown was placed on the National Register of Historic Places, locking the town into a permanent analog state. Why is it cheap? Isolation, limited jobs, and winters that feel personal. The economy leans on tourism, history, and people who genuinely like snow. Growth is restricted, change is suspicious, and Amazon delivery drivers definitely judge you. Local quote vibe is peak small town honesty. It's great here as long as you don't need much. That's the unofficial town slogan, whether they admit it or not. Wallace is quiet. Not peaceful quiet. Existential quiet. The kind where you hear your boots crunch in the snow and wonder if you've always lived here. Bars feel like time capsules. Conversations repeat because the stories are already perfect. The fashion is flannel forward. Always. Wallace didn't change because it physically couldn't. And honestly, that's kind of the charm. It's affordable, sturdy, and stubbornly stuck in the 1970s in the most literal way possible. Town number 7, Bay Street, Lewis, Mississippi. One-liner up front, Bay Street. Louis feels like the 1970s went coastal and decided flip-flops were formal wear. Let's talk price shock, because the Gulf Coast still refuses to act expensive. You can buy a house here for less than what people in Miami spend on hurricane shutters and denial. Not beachfront mansion? Cheap? Real? Livable? Wait, there's water nearby? Cheap. Bay St. Louis sits along Mississippi's Gulf Coast, population around 10,000, and has spent decades existing in a strange time loop. After Hurricane Camille in 1969, and then again after Katrina in 2005, the town rebuilt, but emotionally stayed put. By the 1970s, the vibe was locked in. Small-town coastal, slow pace, porch-sitting energy, and a deep suspicion of anything that feels rushed. Why is it cheap? Jobs are limited, wages are modest, and hurricanes have a way of keeping speculation humble. Development happens slowly and carefully. Big money flirts with the area, then remembers the weather and backs away respectfully. Local, quote, energy feels baked into the humidity. We don't hurry here. If you do, that's your problem. That's not rudeness, that's philosophy. Life moves slow, really slow. Stores close when the owner feels like it. Everyone knows everyone's business, including the fish. The heat is intense, the humidity is weaponized, and summer feels like living inside someone's mouth. But people are friendly in a way that feels genuine, not transactional. Bay Street Louis hasn't changed because it's been too busy surviving and rebuilding to reinvent itself. It's affordable, resilient, and proudly stuck in a laid-back 1970s rhythm where time bends around the tide. Town number 8, Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania. One-liner right out the gate. Jim Thorpe feels like the 1970s took a field trip to a coal town and never boarded the bus home. Let's hit the price shock, because Pennsylvania still does affordability like it's a personal vendetta. You can buy a house here for less than what people in New York pay annually for rent. Increases they're not allowed to argue with. It's not flashy cheap. It's solid bones and questionable carpet cheap. Jim Thorpe sits in eastern Pennsylvania, population just under 4,500, wedged into the Pocono Mountains. It was once a booming coal town, then coal left, and by the 1970s the town pivoted into tourism without changing the soul. The result? A place that looks preserved, acts preserved, and emotionally never left the analog era. Why is it cheap? Limited industry, steep terrain, and a tourism economy that shows up hard on weekends and disappears Monday morning. Jobs exist, but they're seasonal and service heavy. Growth is constrained by geography and history, and the town likes it that way. Local quote vibe is painfully accurate. It's beautiful, but living here is different than visiting. That sentence has ended many dreams. The town is walkable, charming, and allergic to speed. Traffic happens twice a year. Winters are long, gray, and quiet enough to hear your thoughts echo. The aesthetic is brick, iron, and nostalgia. Everyone dresses like they're either hiking or attending a historical reenactment by accident. Jim Thorpe hasn't changed because it figured out a formula and refused to update it. It's affordable, scenic, and deeply rooted in a 1970s preservation mindset that values atmosphere over ambition. Town number 9, Silver City, New Mexico. One-liner, straight to the point. Silver City feels like the 1970s took a wrong turn, found the desert, and decided this was authentic living. Price shock first because New Mexico quietly refuses to participate in national housing delusion. You can still buy a house here for less than what people in California spend annually on pretending they're fine. Real houses, with yards and stories. Some of those stories are structural, but still. Silver City sits in southwestern New Mexico, population around 10,000, surrounded by high desert, mountains, and a whole lot of personal space. It was once a major mining town, then the mines slowed, the money thinned, and by the 1970s, the town pivoted into arts, counterculture, and we don't need much energy. And then it stopped evolving entirely. Why is it cheap? Isolation, limited job diversity, and a town economy that runs on education, healthcare, art, and vibes. Growth exists, but it's cautious. Chain stores are tolerated, not celebrated. Ambition is allowed, but only if it doesn't raise rent.